Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Field Between. My name is Ahmed.
And I'm Yasmin.
We hunkered down in the house, avoiding
Windows.
windows or phones, pretty much everything, kind of just like a little paranoid conspiracy theorists, schizophrenics. But both candidates are doing their campaign rallies here in Western Pennsylvania.
It's
to close
Monday,
it out.
Monday, November the 4th, so the night before the election.
Yeah.
And we don't want to give too much personal information out, but Trump is currently a 14-minute walk from our house.
I just got another election text.
I did literally before you clicked record.
Yeah.
Y'all, I know this is not the most serious problem in the world. I know that people are really suffering in a lot of ways, but I have to complain one last time.
Yeah.
The election texts are out of fucking control. It has been it's driving me insane. I know I've said it before, but you're going to hear it again. This is my third swing state. I've lived in Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
They're all following me.
Yeah.
I last lived in Wisconsin when I was 21 years old. I am now 32. How is their data so out of whack? How are they still contacting me? But mostly it's Pennsylvania. Apparently we just broke some kind of record. I don't remember the exact numbers, but for the single most amount of campaign money or the single most amount of ad money with the two combined parties spent in any state, singular state. It's out of control. It's ridiculous. It's honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's turned some people off from voting because it's just so pervasive and insane. It's never been worse than today.
Yeah.
Every hour, multiple texts really feels crazy.
Texts, calls.
Yeah. Flyers.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind the flyers, but thankfully we're not in a place that someone can easily door knock.
There's got to be a study done on the effectiveness of every additional dollar.
When does it reach saturation point?
I think the only thing I can analogize it to is I know there have been studies done on those mail flyers that you get for Walmart or something where they're having a sale and you just end up throwing them away, right? It's the junk mail stuff. And the question is why, or the assumption is these must be somewhat effective or have a considerable positive effect on sales for them to keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
But I think there were actually studies done to show if those flyers or those mailers are actually effective, and it was found that they weren't.
Interesting.
But because some VP or some regional manager or something has always done it and doesn't want to be the person who suddenly stops to do it or something like that, they just keep doing it. It's kind of baked into the process already.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say, I feel like I learned one or two things from YouTube ads that I then Googled. So there was that. And I think I received one or two texts that included links with where to find my polling place. And I appreciated that. But there's just something about the sheer volume that really turns you off the process. And just it really feels like you're kind of under siege almost, psychologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where that saturation point is or how you could calculate it, but it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yeah, now both candidates are here. I mean, really, Western Pennsylvania is the swingiest of swing states, I guess. And we're Pittsburgh is the biggest city in Western Pennsylvania. So it's relentless. But we're safe in our house. You're trying to get the cat to say she was tired too?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the cat.
How
she
do
came
you
over
feel
here.
with Tata? Classic. When we want her to talk, she doesn't talk.
Yeah, she doesn't say. But okay, yeah. So
for it to be over.
Actually, both of them were supposed to be downtown. Trump is right now doing his rally. He had one in Raleigh earlier today, and now is here. They're both closing out in Pittsburgh.
Actually, Harris is flying to Philly tonight. So she's actually ending in Philly.
Yeah.
But she's
They're both
here
ending in
most of the night.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think, because we last episode we gave our predictions and mine was that Kamala Harris would return to Western Pennsylvania and eat the sandwich, and she has done one of those things. Do you think she'll do the second?
I'm sure she had Primanti today. There's no way they didn't force her to have it.
Because she changed her location from, I guess, downtown to a place called the Cary Blast Furnace, which is like a giant steel manufacturing place, and I assume it's done for the optics, right, to make it look like.
Yeah, I think also Point Park Place, which was the initial idea, like from a security standpoint, maybe was not the best. Like it's very like open. I'm not sure how they would have secured that. It's like exposed to the water on 2 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, she can gain a few extra points here in the last stretch of the campaign if she
Has a
is both
Vermonti
at
sandwich.
the furnace, yes, and then eats the sandwich.
Does she have to eat the sandwich at the furnace? Because I'm sure she ate the poor sandwich.
I mean,
today.
that would be
like a special.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's no way she could lose.
Yeah.
Nate Silver actually, in his final prediction, put her up.
In Pennsylvania?
No, for the overall election.
Yeah, I've changed my prediction. I think she's gonna win.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's close. It's hard to say, obviously. Not that we like have to say this, but in the end, I'm holding my nose and voting for her tomorrow, which I have a lot of mixed feelings about. And you're still voting for Stein, so that's where we ended up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll be voting for Stein.
Excited for it to be over. I'm nervous. It's like this is also not the biggest problem in the world, but I do think it's going to be like a little bit weird for a while either way. Like for us personally.
What do you mean?
Like I think that if Trump wins, that's going to be rough domestically.
Yeah.
And I think that if Harris wins, I think that Trump is going to like contest the election, and that's going to be rough.
Yeah.
So something to look forward to either way.
Yeah. It'll be fun. We'll it'll be a new day in America, and that's
every day's a new day in America, babe.
No. Okay. Then I guess it won't be fun. All right. What do we have for this episode?
Items.
We got some items. Actually, speaking of Kamala Harris, this is my first one.
Let's hear it.
This is just an incredible moment of political acumen and just being able to work the crowd.
Oh, I saw this.
Where is it?
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that. Because it's about all of us. It's about all of us. And listen.
I love that. They're just going, Kamala.
I think that's so bad. It's just awkward.
It's just absolutely just like took the air out of the moment entirely.
She's not like she's gotten better, but she's not like a great like crowd work person. She's very scripted.
No.
Yeah.
No, I know you've said it several times, but that to me is truly like one of the moments that like you would see in Veep.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Could you just imagine being in that crowd? Kamala, right? Like everyone's on beat. There's a cadence.
Yeah.
And then she's just like, okay.
Totally disrupts the flow.
Okay, now everyone chant your own name, which is like just an insane thing to do, because it's just like, imagine how many different syllables everyone's just like it's just like Pokemon, just like say your own name.
We haven't done a West Wing update for a while, but I have to say that the president on West Wing is getting better. But also
still looking for excuses to bomb countries.
True to form, a real American president, still fucking terrible on foreign policy, but he's better than any real world domestic president. Like domestically, like he does things that like no president would ever do in the real world. So it's kind of fun to watch. But
we'll get into this on the West Wing episode, but I feel like still the only in their whole ramp up where they're like, we're gonna do stuff. Yes, it's the age of doing stuff and not being afraid and not backing down. And the only thing he's done so far is like nominate 2 people to the Federal Elections Commission.
Yeah, but in order to help with like campaign finance reform.
It's true.
So that's pretty big.
Yeah.
He also looks like he's now going to take on guns, which is truly not something an American president would ever do. But
after being shot at.
After being shot at, right.
Or shot, actually, not just shot at.
But I was going to say, like, now I see the memes everywhere. It's crazy. I don't know if they were always there, if it's the kind of thing that I'm looking for it, but like I do feel like I have a new sense of like political literacy and just like people making West Wing references.
Well, also that and your phone, it's probably knows that you are
you're right.
watching West Wing.
But it's fun. It's fun to see the memes and understand them.
Yeah. Okay. I've got another item. Some life advice.
Okay.
from a divorce lawyer.
Oh.
Yes.
You trying to tell me something?
Well, he is.
Okay.
Is that the most
Yeah.
thing in people's lives?
Come on.
My most controversial opinion is that the most important thing in people's lives and their greatest accomplishment should not be their children. I find that logic very strange. Because if you say the most important, greatest thing I ever did in my life was having children, well, is then the greatest and most important thing your children ever did going to be having children? And is the greatest thing their children ever did is having children? Because that's the ideology of a virus or a cancer cell.
Oh my God.
Like, it's not like growth for the sake of growth for the sake of growth. Like, I think there has to be a higher, nobler purpose to life than reproduction.
This guy's oh, come on. All right, that's enough. What do you think about that? Agree?
Like, it's
Disagree?
unnecessarily antagonistic. I feel like good parents are proud of their children, and that helps them become like, well-rounded people.
Do you think your parents are most proud of you?
Yeah.
Cancer.
Okay.
Cancerous
Just
ideology.
like a random guy you saw on your feed.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm into hustling and grinding.
Oh, is he that
so,
kind of guy too?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Cancerous ideology. Growth for the sake of growth. Bad when you apply it to children. Good when you apply it to companies.
I see. Good for money, bad
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Because certainly the growth incentive for companies is not at all destructive to
The planet,
society, planet, one's individual health.
no repercussions.
No, I don't think so. I think just getting better and richer. Yeah. But anyway, what were you asking?
I was going to say, give the people a quick update. How are you feeling with only 1 week left of employment? Friday's your last
Less
day.
than a week. No, Thursday's my last day.
Thursday's your last day?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, by the way, what time are my parents getting here on Thursday?
I think like midday, I want to say.
Fuck.
We'll put them on an Uber. I'll figure it out.
Because I
You're
scheduled
working.
a car appointment.
Oh. Let's figure that out after this.
Okay.
But
All
yeah,
right.
your parents are coming here Thursday and they're leaving Sunday morning, which will be fun. We haven't had them here and we haven't seen them since the wedding, I think, in May. So
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I am leaving, my work days are a lot more flexible. So I've been doing the important things like kind of just taking care of myself, going to the gym, feeling stressed, but stressed about human considerations and not things that like a robot would be stressed about. So that's nice. I feel, like I said last time, I just kind of feel like I'm more able to kind of connect to things beyond myself for the first time in a long time, and that feels good in its own way. Yeah, that's it. You know.
nice. Oh,
I'm
we have one
straight-
more major update we forgot to give.
What is that?
We had the first cafe this weekend.
Oh yeah, we did the open hours. That went pretty well.
Yeah, that was really cool. It was really fun having people in our space. It was a big learning curve. Like, I think you made too much chai, but better have too much than too little.
Yep.
But it was really cool. It was really interesting. Like, it felt very different, obviously, because it
Yes.
was like a cafe.
Yeah, I don't know if it was different in a.
There are
Good
more
way?
people I
I don't
didn't
know.
know
There are,
than
yeah.
would normally be in our house. Like,
Yeah.
someone asked me how I knew you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's my husband. And they,
Right.
oh, no, they
That's
actually
funny.
asked me where I lived. And I
Uh-huh.
was like sitting on our couch and I was like, oh, I live here.
Right.
But they were super nice. They just like, we didn't know each other. It was kind of a funny feeling to like meet someone in your own house that way.
Yeah.
Because like I've met, a lot of our friends I've met through you doing these events, honestly. But it kind of feels different when it's not in like your personal space.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked it. It was super fun. I like got a little work done, but mostly just chatted with people all day. Not a bad day.
It was a good. Yeah, it was a good test run. I think definitely there are things we could do better. I don't want to. My concern is I don't want to lose sight of the free events
Yeah,
and
I
like
feel you
making
on
sure that we're doing things that are more kind of I guess community forward, that are just like open to everyone.
Yeah, it's interesting to
Okay, you gotta
maintain that
not wave your
balance. I
microphone
mean,
around.
sorry.
Don't wave your microphone around.
It's interesting to maintain that balance. I mean, obviously we're not making a profit off of this. Like I think barely broke even with like how many supplies we bought and stuff.
Yeah.
And we normally like lose money on them. So it's still not like a for-profit endeavor.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always thought this would be an interesting way to do it, to see if you wanted to ever test drive like actually having a cafe and like changing careers that way. But if you continue to feel that way, I think that's a good indication of like, yeah, this is meant to be more of like a project and less of like a business.
Yeah.
So I think it's just good to like check in about that and see how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if you wanted to make it a business, it would also be a lot more kind of like, yeah, it would be a different thing. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chai business is saturated now.
It is. There's so many chai people. It's everywhere.
People doing it.
Oh my gosh, that reminds me of a tweet that I had pulled off that I thought was really cute. I'm gonna read it really fast. So someone, Sola Eclipse, tweeted, "I actually need a late night bar, but one that serves like really nice tea instead." And then Farida, written in Arabic, retweeted it and said, "The people yearn for Arab nightlife."
Yeah.
Which I think is true. It's really sweet. I feel like we're seeing like, there's actually even a Times article that I think I sent you recently about Kahwa House, which is like a Yemeni coffee shop that's kind of taken off and has a lot of different branches now.
Yeah.
And how like, you know, a lot of like young Arabs and Muslims will go there, but also like just people who want to like hang out and socialize and not drink alcohol, which is really sweet.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I forgot to hit record on the Zoom, but I've been recording into Logic.
That should be okay.
Oh, let me hit record just in case.
All right.
All right. From here on, we'll have 2 separate tracks.
Beautiful.
Oops.
That's all right. All right. Next item.
The next item, what do I have? Let me go back and look. Actually, it will be nice to be able to use that monitor once we have our podcasting studio set up.
Shwaya bishwaya. We're getting
Whoa, look at that. It's good Arabic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. More life advice. This from President Donald Trump, I think, earlier today.
You know the best way to stop depression? Work your ass off. You don't have time. You
Honestly,
work so hard that you don't have time for depression.
I hate to
what
say
do you
this.
think about that?
That's like 100% true for me personally.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm like much more prone to rumination and sadness when I'm not like. This kind of adds to my theory. Like, oh, this is too far of a tangent.
You think
like,
Trump's good?
No.
Oh.
Just a personal theory about myself, but I feel like, yeah, I can get like overextended and tired.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I'm more likely to be like deeply existentially sad if I'm not doing several things at once. I don't like that about myself.
I've been leaning into the deep existential sadness, and that's been good.
That's like not new though.
No,
Yeah.
like I've been listening to shout out J. William Henderson. Excellent artist.
Lovely.
Really lovely music that is, for me, I don't know, like really capturing a moment, right? Like I think that's how you know the mark of a good artist is just like you listen to something and then you just like feel something that you just haven't been able to express yourself. So it's been on repeat. Definitely recommend you listen to him, folks. Yeah. But you, what are your feelings?
On Trump?
No, on making sure the existential sadness. You don't want to lean into it. You want to.
I mean, no, I think it like depends. I feel like also what I'm doing, I think part of it is like when I'm doing things that are like engaged in community.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just busyness for busyness sakes, right? But like when I feel like I'm doing stuff that like is fulfilling, I am less likely to be sad.
Can I make an observation?
Sure.
Is well, I don't think you'll be surprised in me saying I feel like sometimes you overextend yourself.
For sure, yeah.
And then you crash from all that.
Yeah, I do that
and
like
then
probably
you get
once
sad
a month.
Because by comparison, you're no longer, you're like, oh, I'm not doing any. Like literally yesterday, you're like, you were sad and you're like, I haven't done anything. I'm like, you literally just got back from like a 2-week long bike trip.
Okay, 8 days. What if my employer hears this? It was 8 days.
8-day-long bike trip, but then
And,
also
like, 2
you went to go give
lectures,
some lectures and you saw some friends.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I do think also, to be fair to me, I think like the same way that you go through periods of like depression and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that like I don't struggle with depression, but I do struggle with like some anxiety and stuff. And I think that it is cyclical for me in a lot of ways. Like it specifically seems to like follow my menstrual cycle, which doesn't mean that like I'm always going to get sad before then. But if something's going on in my life, I'm more likely to get sad.
Yeah.
Which is something I actually learned through living with you.
Yeah.
In terms of like,
at first I was called, at first they said I was a sexist. And then
who's they? It was just me. It's just your wife.
Yes, I know. But then they said, maybe you have a point.
What really sold it for me though, and I think I can mention this person by name because it's like a cool thing. Or okay, we have like a friend who is very multi-talented, but who had an art exhibit about struggling with premenstrual depression. And like I messaged her afterwards and I was like, oh wow, like that really, like everything you describes like symptoms that I have.
Yeah.
Like feelings of like of self, like I don't really struggle that much with like intense feelings of like self-doubt or self-worth, but like those kind of feelings and even feelings of like, just like really like utter dread that I don't feel normally. It was really cool to see someone like put that into words. And so that really helped me also to kind of be like, oh, okay, like I can kind of vaguely track this then, you know?
You're right.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a human thing to like want to feel connected and want to feel busy.
Yeah, of course.
And I think like I am like a little bit of a type A overachiever, but I'm not like a type A in terms of like I'm not the most consistent, I would say, but I do have like a lot of big goals and stuff. So when I fall short of them, I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to save this till the end of the episode and close on it, but I feel like it's appropriate now.
Okay.
I was, because I think this all kind of comes back to a yearning to connect to something higher.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all part and parcel of like a search for beauty. And after I quit my job, I found myself kind of better able to reconnect, or at least take time to make an effort to, again, like think about things in a way that felt meaningful. And I went to the park and I read one of the books that Sam Hazo gave us. And if you don't know who Sam Hazo is, he was the first and only poet laureate of Pennsylvania, and we did an episode with him. He is now 96 years old.
Masha.
As like mentally sharp and nimble as ever.
So inspiring.
Able to just like recall poetry off the top of the head and like in an incredible way, and a beautiful reciter of poetry. But anyway, so he has this essay in his book, Who Needs a Horse That Flies, that I read and like felt very moved by. But it's called The Dangerous Necessity of Beauty. And I just really love these last two paragraphs, so I'm just going to read that because I feel like it's relevant to what we're talking about. Actually, last 3 paragraphs, but I'll be quick. Any beautiful object or sound actuates our imaginations. A work of art in any medium awakens the latent imaginative power in all of us. One does not merely hear a beautiful song or tone poem. One absorbs it until one's entire self is one with it. And the experience is not easily or ever forgotten. Moreover, whether we realize it or not, we are changed, however slightly, by the experience. To some, that is a blessing. To others, it is a danger. Fundamentalists, dogmatists, advocates of thought control, dictators, censors, and rigorous moralists who are self-appointed defenders of public morality are often suspicious and opposed to the arts for just that reason. Attempts to suppress, demonize, or otherwise denigrate the beautiful in our lives for whatever reason, pseudo-religious, political, or otherwise, are eventually futile for the simple reason that suppressing the indispensable is against a natural law. Like freedom, beauty, once experienced, prevents the one who experienced it from returning to his former condition. Small wonder, then, that poets and artists are among the first to be tried, imprisoned, or murdered when totalitarians rule. Creators of beauty remind us of those resources that repressive societies fear most.
That's so lovely.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's also nice to acknowledge that like sometimes having, I felt this when we first fell in love, like sometimes having intense moments of connection and beauty can almost be a little scary because it is such a high. And that's why it's important to remember to like find that in the everyday too. Like it's not really sustainable to be like in that kind of state all the time, because like the laundry has to get done or the bills have to get paid and like, you know, but even like just to walk around and like see the leaves changing and feel like really kind of be present for that is really lovely. I think, yeah, being
not
present.
very Sufi of you.
Well, actually, there's like a lot of like Sufi teachings, like contemporary Sufi teachings about like, ideally you could kind of like be in a state of worship while doing the dishes. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, like repetitive action is a way of like that. Like, yeah, it's not like as if you have to be in some sort of sublime circumstance. That really the goal is that wherever you are, you're connected to God, you know?
But aren't you supposed to connect in a way that you are experiencing, right? Like they say some people experience that moment of religious or like romantic ecstasy, like for a second. And the goal is to like make that second into a minute and then a minute into an hour and then
that
to a
could
day.
Be a goal,
and,
but it could also be a goal to find like lesser versions of that in more of your everyday life, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, I know. I think what you're saying makes sense also. Yeah. That's really lovely.
Yeah. Hopefully we get to catch up with the guy soon.
Yeah, it might be just you. I'm going to be very jealous, but I think that would still be really lovely.
Yeah, I want to, if he's down, I want to actually have a conversation about his thoughts on beauty and love and maybe like literary forms of that he really likes. Because admittedly, I feel like that would be a fun conversation with him, especially because I don't read a lot of fiction. I'm not a very literary person, but
I think poetry has been kind of your door to that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be nice to kind of hear him talk about it, I think.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. All right, I got kind of a rough item. I feel like there's no good place to put it, so I might just put it here. I think this is on your list too. I feel like we just kind of have to address this because it's depressing and a lot of people are talking about it. We might put like a trigger warning. We don't normally do that, and I like have mixed feelings about how effective those are. But like if you don't want to hear about like sexual violence or abuse, maybe we'll just like put some post stamps on when we talk about that. Does that sound good? Like in the show notes?
Oh. Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah, you can just give like a
That's
rough,
fine. Yeah.
Because this is pretty rough, but there is an organization called Maghrib Institute, and so if you're familiar with Yasser Qadi, he's probably the kind of like most well-known imam sheikh that came out of that, though he's no longer with the institute.
Mm-hmm.
They're fairly, I wouldn't say middle of the road. They like lean more towards conservatism. They started in Texas, but most of what they do is pretty nuts and bolts stuff of like Quran recitation, Quran study, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
They provided like a lot of programming.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like wanted to go to a lecture, if you wanted to even like find a resource or a place to have like a Quran teacher, it's like a place to go.
Yeah.
And one of their like higher up folks who's in the organization, his name was Wissam Sherif. Came out that he was like sexually abusing a very young student, like specifically the student's student's mother was recording her, and they were producing child pornography.
Yeah.
So super, just I mean, like absolutely soul-crushingly awful stuff.
Yeah.
And Al Maghrib Institute put out like a really kind of just like.
So if you read the Al Maghrib Institute's statement on what happened, you would think maybe he got a DUI.
Yeah.
Or like, made like a bad Instagram post, right? It doesn't mention anything about conspiracy to produce child pornography.
Yeah. And the way that this came out was actually the Imam Wissam Sharif's wife found it, and to her infinite credit, and just, obviously the right thing to do, but I'm sure required some bravery. She's the one who turned him in.
Right.
She reported it immediately, apparently.
Yeah.
Which is, so glad that she did that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the statement is just like, oh, well, he violated one of our policies. After an investigation, we found that he violated one of our policies.
Insane language.
And not like, oh, this man violated like
basic
God's,
moral
like,
decency.
law,
Yeah, yeah, no, insane.
It's crazy. And I think a lot of people are upset about the reaction to this. One from the institute and its kind of very generic statement on something this serious. And two, just from the Muslim community at large, because it just seems like this is such a severe case, and we're not really like holding like these Muslim
I will
leaders
say,
to
like,
account in the way that they ought to be.
Like 95% of the commentary I've seen has been like horrific.
Yeah.
Like, and absolutely like use this man's name, make it known.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that's been the vast majority of the response, as it should be.
Yeah.
There is like 10% of the commentary. I know all of this is also based on our individual ecosystems. You know,
Yeah.
I have no
Okay.
way of saying if like this is what everyone thinks who's heard about this, but
Mhm.
there is like 10% of the kind of commentary that I really can't stomach, which is like maybe this was a setup, maybe it was the FBI, like this is playing into Islamophobia, and it's like that's bullshit. Like
Yeah.
Of course, like we're not going to like physically punish this man until he's been tried in court, but like someone's wife turning in evidence is like fucking good enough reason to start smearing his like name in the mud,
Right.
and like to also like seriously ask for this institute to do an audit of their internal policies and of like who they hold up to be spiritual leaders, and like it's reason enough to question all of that.
Yep.
And Islamophobia is not an excuse to like lower the standards that we have for our community leaders. Like, I just think that's like so obnoxious and ridiculous.
The already
like,
kind of fairly low standards.
Yeah, they're not high.
Honest,
like,
right? That's the thing. It's just like it has such a, whether people realize it or not, just such a profound effect on how Islam is practiced, especially in diaspora, where there are people who are really looking to build community through religion, or like, and vice versa, right? To build their own spiritual belief through a community that they feel is also representative of who they are. And it just seems like most of the leaders or the people who get appointed to kind of leadership positions in, you know, the Muslim community in diaspora, or like that lives outside kind of like Muslim majority countries or whatever, but they're just not fit to be called leaders, and it makes people turn away from community, and like it sucks.
I will say we do have some good leaders, and I will also say, and this is not in any way an excuse or trying to shirk from responsibility, but it does seem to be an unfortunate pattern that spiritual abuse is very common in a lot of religious communities. And I think that maybe there's just something about like hierarchy that like people who are evil are drawn to like have control over people. And so it's something that we should be like very wary of, especially, you know, for most of us, like there are some differences in, you know, sectarian differences, but for a lot of Muslims, like there is no clergy class. So like we get to choose our leaders and we don't have to like put them on pedestals. You know what I mean? Like that's not necessary or required by us for our faith.
Yeah.
And if anything, that is maybe like a blessing that we could try and like diversify who we look at, and like not just have one person that we put I mean, look, there will be evil people, and you know, thank God they are the exception. And like, it's not as if it's anyone's fault for not knowing that this man was evil.
Right.
But it's a good reminder that you should never you should never worship a person. Like that's just really not like a tenet of our faith. And in fact, it's like a little icky. And you're right. Like I can see how there'd be a temptation to do that, especially if you're a religious minority, to be like, well, my kids need to like go here, you know, to like get properly Islamically trained or whatever. But like, just being careful. Another kind of annoying strand of commentary that I saw, I forgot to mention this, was people being like, oh, like, okay, we need to have more women teaching women Quran, which like, yes, like we should, that's true. But I think some of the weird thought behind that is like, oh, better gender segregation. Like some people were saying like, oh, like a Muslim man should never teach like a girl. And like, that is just fucked up to me, because like, thankfully most men, Muslim or not, are not sexualizing children. Yeah. And I think if anything, like when we really have extreme gender divisions like that, or we kind of like sexualize everything, it kind of creates more, I mean, nothing like this, obviously. Like, I don't know how you explain this. It's just like some awful aberration, but like it can kind of sexualize things that don't have to be sexualized, if that makes sense. Right. So like, for an example, a personal experience I've had that I like, when I was at Harvard, there was like a religious leader who seemed pretty chill, who I like liked. And I won't name who it was, obviously, but this is like a little vulnerable, but like I learned to pray like before I had any Arabic training at all, like even before I could read the alphabet. And so I I mismemorized some really basic prayers, like very short, basic ones that like children learn.
Right.
And it's kind of like memorizing like song lyrics wrong, and that it's very hard to like catch yourself doing it, even if you technically can read it. And even when it's pointed out to you, or maybe I'm just like a little dumb, I don't know, but like it's hard to like correct basically.
Right.
And after you know like that you're doing it wrong, it's kind of like, damn, like I really would like to fix this.
Right.
So anyway, it was kind of a vulnerable ask, and I went up to this leader and I was like, hey, like, explain the situation. Sure, I'm not the only person in the US that has this issue or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is embarrassing, but like I would really like to just like sit with someone and like go through this really short surah that I know I'm mispronouncing, that I can hear I'm mispronouncing, but I just like can't memorize it correctly. Not something I, God bless me that I used to actually be interested. I haven't worked on this kind of shit for a long time, unfortunately. But anyway, it was a kind of vulnerable ask, and he was like super weird about it. He was like, I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting alone with you.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask my wife if she would like to sit with you. And I was like, you're a fucking religious leader. Like, if you can't sit, like, I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like, it just really fucking sucked, honestly. It was kind of devastating. And yeah, the answer to that, like, it's just not to be a fucking weirdo. Like, it never occurred to me in a million years that this man who was a leader, like, he had, like, open hours. That's how I got to him. Like, I wasn't cornering him in some back alley. You know what I mean?
Well, sister, if you're in the room with him, who knows what would happen if the door was closed?
Keep it open. Like, I don't care. Like,
but shaitan
I just like
be in there, and then
I think it shows, honestly. I think we overdo it sometimes, even like in non-Muslim majority contexts. Like, we get so weird about stuff. Like, not to like weird shit happens everywhere, but like I actually did get a chance to do that with this like older woman when I was in Morocco. And again, I'm making it sound like these were the most basic ass prayers. Like, it truly is embarrassing.
Yeah.
But like Surat al-Nas, I was mispronouncing like jinn, which are like spirits, as Jannah, which is like a very different meaning. Jannah is heaven. But anyway, I sat with this Moroccan lady who helped me out with that prayer specifically. And I came like wearing a hijab, and she was like, what are you doing? Like, no one's here.
Yeah.
Because I was like so nervous in mosque spaces and religious spaces. And she was just like, chill, it's just you and I. Like, I feel like it was so much more relaxed, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously she was a woman and there was different circumstances, but she was like a hijabi normally. And I thought like, oh, we're reading Quran. Like, I should be, and she was just like, had tea and was like, yeah, your pronunciation's awful, but like, you don't need to have a hijab on right now. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I was like a bit of a tangent, but I just feel like, I don't think the answer to this is like, oh, we don't need Muslim male leaders. Like, yes, we need more leaders who are women.
Yep.
Maybe one day, inshallah, within our lifetime, also leaders who are non-binary. That would be incredible. We don't need just male leaders, but we also like just need to like expect more of our male leaders and not over-sexualize everything.
Well, I think, the thing that happens here is that like this overly formal way of just being in the community, right? Like, they put up these walls and like act in a certain way as like as to say, oh, I'm being pious and proper, and like anything outside of this rigid way of interacting with you is haram, and it like lets something bad in. It's actually, it is so counterproductive to forming, again, like a like truly close-knit spiritual community, right? Because then the masjid and like places where you're having events become places where everyone kind of puts on this, like, dons this
like mask
facade,
almost, yeah,
right? And you're not actually forming any sort of like real bonds, right? Because we're all just like playing at being like perfect Muslims. And a spiritual leader should be someone who can like counsel you on your flaws and like be able to do that in a way that doesn't make you feel like they're the ones judging you, because they can't be the ones who are judging you, right? Like,
or even
it's not
if
their
they
place
can,
to
like,
do
look, even if they're coming from a more normative, prescriptive place, they should be able to handle their own urges. You know what I mean? Like, even if they think ideally you wouldn't dress this way, whatever, like maybe they'll get you towards that point. I mean, I even think that's shitty, but like, yeah, like if you're a leader of a community spiritually, you just shouldn't have those kind of issues. Like,
and listen, I'm not going to be the person who's like, this is how it should look or whatever, right? Like, I'm not going to make prescriptions, but I can tell you that something is wrong when the masajid feel exactly like a corporate office in terms of environment.
Damn.
And it just something needs to change, and the leadership needs to change if that's
The
where we're
Musk
going.
is way too chaotic to be a corporate office.
Right. Aside if you
But I
know,
feel you
aside
on,
from
like,
like
the
the
feeling of
parking
sterileness.
situation, right? Like, or whatever, like that people talk about,
Yeah.
or how actually like, nice and whatever they are, but like the way that people interact, it is kind of like very office politics-y
Interesting.
sort of way. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think like actually one thing that, insofar as I do feel comfortable making prescriptions on this sort of thing, is we need more like non-male leaders in these spaces, and like that's unfortunately I feel like gonna just take such a long time and not gonna happen easily, but it's gotta start somewhere.
And they should be teaching men too. Like like young boys should learn Quran from women. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh shoot. Okay. I mean, Logic just stopped recording, but hopefully we got everything on this thing.
Oh man.
That's a nice backup, right?
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah. I'm not saying fewer men are, I guess maybe in some sense I am. Like, I'm not saying like men shouldn't be able to be leaders or trusted, right? But there's at least half the population that we're, denying, who are perfectly capable, and that we're denying like these sorts of positions.
And it is probably a little bit of like I mean, there probably are less women who are trained for this role. And so you're right that it probably is a bit of a catch-up thing too, like because like less roles are available, and you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah. And it also calls into question, like, what is the role of an imam in the US? Like,
yeah,
like, thankfully, like, I know a lot of imams now who also like get counseling degrees or like will do some kind of basic training, because like, of course you need to have basic religious knowledge, but there's a good chance that you will need more than that to kind of like serve the needs of the people you're working with.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, very, very icky. So glad that it was brought to the light. I mean, really glad is not the right word, but like at least it wasn't swept under the rug. That's the least that could have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what comes of it. I actually did not know anything about Al Maghrib Institute. I've never really used it, but
I haven't used it either.
I think one of the things that
Just
this
heard of
guy
them.
did teach were like Quran classes to kids.
Yep.
Right. So
Astaghfirullah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, fuck him. I don't know what else to say. And
that's right. Just move on to the next item.
May he face severe judgment in this world and the next. Speaking of terrible leaders, I don't know if you have been seeing the headlines about Saudi Arabia, but something we've talked about before is the city that they're building, NEOM. That's like this planned city of the future out in the middle of the desert. And I think it's worth talking about because I think it gets lost in the conversation about how horrible Israel is, and Israel is truly horrible. But Saudi Arabia is every bit as bad, and it just kind of, whatever lip service any of the Saudi Arabian leaders pay to the Palestine issue, you just know is bullshit. Because one, they were going to normalize relations with Israel, shortly before October 7th. And that's been kind of put on hold, but I'm sure it will resume once people get some semblance of a ceasefire after Palestine has been thoroughly destroyed. But in this city and in Saudi Arabia in general, a lot of the
so the city
jobs
is NEOM. We should
the
say.
city's NEOM, yeah. But I think I mentioned that. But yeah, it depends on migrant labor, right? And so a lot of these migrants are essentially also slaves, right? Like it's not just, oh, we're hiring people because we don't have enough people here. It is a kind of a hyper-capitalist company, or sorry, a hyper-capitalist country, that is also kind of an ethno-state or apartheid states.
Definitely. Quick sidebar, but yeah, you can't become a citizen of Saudi. Like, you have to be from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Depends on that, right? Like, who's going to do the work other than like slaves? And so they import all this migrant labor, people who are trying to send money back to their families from, India, from Bangladesh, from Philippines, like a lot of, poor Southeast Asian countries. In a lot of cases, they have their passports taken away so that they can't leave again, and the working conditions are terrible, right? So, and it's been reported, and I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, this is an undercount, right? It's been reported 21,000 migrant workers have died building NEOM, which I know we did like a jokey episode about Saudi Arabia and NEOM and like how dystopian that all is. And I think we've talked about it before.
Of the curve on that.
And the whole plan for the city is that it's 3 layers, where it's, the top layers where people go and do luxury shopping, the middle layers like transportation. And then I always joke, like, they say that the bottom layer is like logistics and all this stuff. And
like Disneyland, like you don't see the people who are working. Yeah.
And it is slave pits, I'm sure, right? Is what it's going to end up being. It's not going to be like robots and like all this. It's going to be slave pits. And so it seems like, again, I say it's an undercount because there's no independent media in Saudi Arabia that can really report on this. And 100,000 workers who are unaccounted for.
Wow, I heard the 21,000 number. I didn't hear the 100,000 number. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I don't know if the 100,000 unaccounted for are specifically with NEOM or just like generally
throughout Saudi
migrant workers in Saudi Arabia. But I think that's like worth obviously pausing on and just
we should boycott. Like, there should be probably a global boycott of Hajj. I know that's like kind of controversial.
So I've said that before, and
is that where I got the idea? It's a good idea. Yeah.
To me, it's like, it's hard to square away because it's slavery. It's something that people say like, oh, Islam is the religion that abolished slavery.
Well, who says that? It definitely
a
wasn't.
lot of people.
There were, that's
historically
not accurate.
It might be historically not accurate.
It
right?
definitely
but
is not.
It's something people say.
That's so silly. I mean, that's like, anyway, that's just like all of the great Muslim empires had, a lot of the like pre-modern world slavery was part of it.
But it provided a framework for, freeing slaves. Is that not right? Or no?
I wish it was. Look, I think it's very similar to Christianity in that there were people who were abolitionists who were Muslim, and there were people who read the same Quran and saw support for slavery. Like, there was very much both.
Yeah.
So obviously we would choose to see the liberatory, but there's plenty of hadith and stuff that talk about slavery as a fact of life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, no, I think speaking like kind of on a more practical level, like it just kind of does seem that as long as it sits within a nation state and not kind of like the Vatican, right, where it's like its own independent state.
That's what it should be. You're so right, because like it's so annoying that we have to like interact with this fucking nation state that is so evil as part of like your.
People are also mad because I don't know if you've seen like all the like the new construction projects that are happening in Mecca, but they're kind of making it luxury resort-ish. People are upset about like the new clock towers that were built and all that.
Yeah. But also like the Mukaab, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Which we also talked about. That's in Riyadh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a golden cube. Like, it literally just looks like a golden Kaaba. Like, I do not get how you cannot find that sacrilegious.
Yeah.
It just like, it's so awkward. I don't understand.
Yeah, there was.
It's like literally worshiping wealth. Like, I think
last time.
I was going to finish. Like, it's literally worshiping wealth. Like, it's very much like shirk. It's very much like idolatry. Like, it seems so blindingly obvious. I don't know how you could not see that.
Yeah. So I think the last time we talked about the Mukaab, it was still,
Under
I don't know if it was,
construction.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. I don't know if it was official. It was just like an idea.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it seems like since then that Saudi Arabia has actually began work on building it.
Mm-hmm.
When I first read about it, it said it was going to fit, or I swear it said it was going to fit 42 Empire State Buildings in
It's
it.
not
and
looking like that.
now it's just 20 Empire State
Wow.
Buildings, which is
Real fall from grace.
not as exciting, to be quite honest with you. But it's going to cost $50 billion,
So insane.
which I feel like all of this is not sustainable. If
Yeah,
Saudi
for people in the desert, for sure not.
well, like all these things, like how
They got oil
They're spe-
money.
they're spending yeah, I know. They're spending $1 trillion from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which, if anything, this should be an argument for the US also having a sovereign wealth fund, because maybe we could actually build some shit here, like if we did it. But anyway, they're slated to spend about $1 trillion.
Wait, what is a sovereign wealth fund? Just like the king's private fund?
Well, I guess maybe in Saudi Arabia, yes, but theoretically, it's because you've nationalized some resources, right? So it could either be companies, like you partially nationalize, or like the government started a fund that owns some shares in that, or you nationalize natural resources like oil and gas.
Wait, so sovereign,
minerals.
what was the term?
Sovereign wealth fund.
So sovereign wealth fund is like a concept of, I'm not familiar with this concept, a concept of nationalization.
I mean, it can be a way to nationalize some things, but it can also just, like any other investment bank, right? Like buy a stake in certain companies.
Got it. Okay.
And so in the US, there have been arguments to start a sovereign wealth fund that would take, you seed it with some like tax revenue. And then also you can say, if you're Apple, who are very good at hiding their taxable revenue in other countries to make it look like they don't really have profits or anything that could be taxed in the US, you just say, all right, we're gonna, instead of paying it in dollars, you're gonna pay your taxes in shares. And so then the US,
Oh, interesting.
i.e. the people, own Apple or
Got it.
part of Apple,
Okay.
or take like a pretty major stake in a corporation, right?
Interesting.
And then you do that over time, and you keep reinvesting it, and then suddenly like you can start to direct industries
Towards
with
projects.
your fund. Or not just towards project, but like you can say, we want to put more overall, right? Like we want to contribute more of GDP, or like into electrical cars, or like renewable energies, for example. And so you move out of one sector, right? You move out of maybe oil and gas, or like the fracking industry or whatever. You move actual funds and contribute it to a different area in the industry, and suddenly like
Interesting.
you have this massive
throw your
$1
weight
trillion.
around, kinda.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting.
Why isn't it doing that? Well, because the US just doesn't operate that way. But Alaska has a sovereign wealth fund.
So interesting.
So because it's like an oil and gas rich state, and it pays a dividend. So citizens in Alaska get like $2,000 or $3,000 a year from their sovereign
Wow,
wealth
I had
fund,
no
because
idea.
and so that would be the same idea here. Is like, I don't know, it may not necessarily have to pay out a dividend, but it could.
Very cool.
Right? It could pay for social services.
But back to Saudi. So the king controls theirs.
Yes. So they have two different funds. One is like I don't remember the names of them exactly, but anyway, they're spending like $1 trillion on NEOM. They're spending $50 billion on this. I'm like, who the fuck is going to go there? Especially like with their horrible human rights track record. Like, I just feel like over time,
Oh,
They're-
so many people. What are you talking
they
about?
are
We live in like a
relying-
world of influencers.
I guess they are relying on the Muslim world to go there for
like Muslims.
Hajj,
Yeah.
right? And maybe that indirectly benefits their tourism industry. And I guess maybe other tourists who just don't care, but like it seems like they are also making themselves a lot more vulnerable as they start to make their economy more dependent on people going there. Like if people just suddenly decide to like be like, we're not gonna go, then who's going to actually take advantage of all this infrastructure?
I think that tourism is only really hurt, unfortunately, when like it's the kind of like horror that you have to see. If they are effectively like
Hidden away.
yeah, like if they're effectively hidden out of sight, then like a lot of people who like aren't well versed in these issues might not even know. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it's not like you're gonna see like someone being like abused by their employer in the street. It's gonna be happening in private homes or I
Yeah.
mean in the case of NEOM, like maybe literally underground, which is really horrific. But
Yeah.
so I don't know how much it'll impact it. And there's been such a like icky like influencers flocking to Dubai. So like which like
Yeah.
also is full of human rights violations. I mean, and like look, no place is perfect, but these are all like pretty extreme places.
Yeah.
Um
Well, I told you.
so I feel like the same thing could happen to Saudi.
Yeah. Remember, I got really into that airport show that
Yeah,
followed
yeah.
like it's on Disney,
Yeah.
right? And it follows the it's
Dubai
called Ultimate
Airport.
Airport Dubai.
Yeah.
And something that I mentioned that I just don't think a lot of other people picked up on who watched this show is that it did accidentally capture the human rights violations
Yeah.
of the migrant workers
Yeah.
because they present it as like, oh, this is just like a tense moment where everyone in the workplace has to rally, but you see an Arab or a British manager telling all these migrant workers who don't really speak English or Arabic that they're gonna have to work like 18 hours a
Like
day
work overtime. Yeah.
so that the king can come
and they're probably not
do a
getting paid
walkthrough of the
overtime.
airport.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess people just don't care, but
I think also like for a lot of like Americans, like they're not going to necessarily know automatically the nuances of like this sounds sad, but like it's just kind of like different brown people to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah, the Dubaiification of a lot of like Arab places is weird, or like the like desire to become that is weird.
yeah. But yes, the Mukaab is I
Being
hope
constructed.
it blows up as soon as it because it's
You said you hope it. What'd you say?
well, I say I hope it blows up, but
Okay.
let me
That was not something we said on this podcast. I
I
mean by acts of nature.
well because it's supposed to be kind of like the Las Vegas sphere
Right.
where the inside of it is just like all these screens.
Sounds horrific.
And my thinking was this is in the desert and you have all these screens that have to generate some level of heat. Like I don't know what
Well,
kind
this
of
is the premise of your like little fiction piece.
yeah, but I guess that's the same can be said of the one in Las Vegas.
And
is
they
that
must
it's
figure
also-
something out.
I guess
Yeah.
they figured something out.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
Other Middle Eastern news item.
Mm-hmm.
Ships of weapons from Israel are now passing through Egypt.
Yeah.
A ship docked in Alexandria, which is crazy. That's the first time that's happened. So not just not doing anything to intervene in the situation. Sisi is now actively helping Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. I had a pretty dispiriting conversation with my dad about all this stuff, and I think he obviously generally agrees that what's happening to the Palestinians is horrible. And I was saying that, and this is just like one man's opinion, but maybe it's kind of it provides some insight to kind of a lot of older Egyptians and about how they feel about the situation. But, obviously, I think everyone there agrees like it's horrible. They really don't like Israel. They haven't for good reason. But when you say like Egypt should do more, right? Like it should actually be involved and not kind of help manage the extermination and the open air concentration camp. They say like, why should we risk our necks
Right.
again? Right. Because they still feel, and like my dad has like uncles who fought in that war and like
The 6 Day War.
relatives.
Yeah.
Where, Israel like occupied Sinai, and they feel like Egypt stuck its neck out and after the war, after the economy was ruined, um, the rest of the Arab world looked down on Egypt, right? Because their economy wasn't developing, and it became, or it still is, like a very poor country relative to its size and just like ability. And they just, I think there's like a hurt to the national pride there, and especially Gulf Arab states, like people in Egypt were called like servants. They'd go there and like work as مخدمات and servants and stuff like that, and maids, and they called them, what was the word, like something about like eating fool, right? Like poor food, like it just kind of like
something
hurt to
I've
the
also
national
said of
character.
Egypt's food.
Huh?
That's the criticism I've also made of Egypt's food.
Yeah,
It's like peasant food.
right. So they feel like they've been looked down upon for forever, and they're like, oh, we stuck our necks out, and now what do we get for it?
I appreciate that. I think that is good perspective. I will say though, I think there's a major difference between not opening your border, which is like cowardly, but like maybe understandable from a nation state perspective.
Yeah.
And allowing a ship to dock is insane.
Yeah.
Like there are other Arab states that have not allowed like there to be like active access to their ports, to their airport. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that I think that's like another level of abetting. That's not just like not acting, but like actively acting.
Yeah.
I mean, and part of the obvious reason for this is that like, and we said this before, Egypt is like the second largest beneficiary of U.S. military aid. Is it second or third? Israel's first, obviously. I think Egypt is either second or third. So like Sisi has
it was like fourth, but yeah, it's up there.
Yeah,
it's up there.
Sisi has like a direct like, and Sisi is the dictator of Egypt, has like a direct like incentive, obviously, to keep the U.S. happy and by extension Israel. But I mean, I'm kind of surprised that he's not more afraid of like popular revolt, because it really seems like that's kind of crossing a line. But I mean, people are terrified of being imprisoned, as they should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that is helpful perspective to be like,
I mean, I get it, but I don't buy it. Like, I understand the argument or whatever. I don't agree that just because they I think you need to take a long, hard look at like the political system that's in place, and like have a much broader theory of change, and not just say, well, things are going to be okay if we don't intervene in Palestine, because they're not. They're just going to get worse.
And the fact that
like,
you
you're
are
not doing
dependent,
anything now, and it's objectively
and the
horrible
fact that
for
you're
most
dependent
people.
on U.S. aid, like U.S. military aid, is kind of like not sustainable long term. Yeah.
Yeah, and why aren't you mad about, like, if you're so mad about being looked down upon by all these other like rich Arab monarchies, why are you literally fucking selling coastlines and taking money from them?
Right.
Like, you're selling parts of your country, like, or rather not you, but you're allowing your dictator to sell parts of the coastline to Dubai, to Emirat. Like,
yeah,
doesn't
that's an
embarrass you even more?
That.
Yeah.
Weird.
So I don't know what to say.
You're not personally responsible, babe. You look so sad.
Huh?
You as an Egyptian are not you're Egyptian American are not personally responsible. You're so cute. You're like, I don't know what to say.
It's
you don't have that kind of access to power. You're not personally responsible.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is a bummer for sure.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, God forgive us, we're not responsible, but we're going to be paying fucking taxes this year, which is so awful.
Well, we are responsible. I think that's the uncomfortable truth.
No, you're right.
We are. It's just we need to figure out how to actually assert or build and then assert
collective
some sort of power.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note.
That all the
what
items?
Else do we have?
That's all I had. You got anything else? You have something lighthearted to close us out? Another one of your men's talking about how to keep the marriage happy. How to not prioritize the children.
Hold on, I did send something to our account.
I knew you had one last item in you.
Oh no, I actually have one that's about other bad Muslim leaders.
Nah, I feel like I'm gonna veto if that's okay. I feel like we had enough bad Muslim leaders for one.
that's-
Unless you feel really strongly that
that's
you can
fair.
override.
No, it's
but
just this like TikTok imam. We'll talk about him some other time.
Yes, look at our cat. Look at her. She's so cute right now. You're so cute, Patata.
What's she
She's
doing?
behind you.
Oh,
She's sleeping.
all right.
Ahmed
Bye.
just woke her up.